I mix what I like. I mix. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, good morning. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Happy to be your host. Again, before we get started, please go to imixwhatilike.org and make sure you subscribe there so you don't miss all the multimedia and varied work that I and my colleagues and comrades do there. There's a lot of stuff, including thousands of hours of audio and video on related subjects that we're going to be discussing today that we talk about all the time, and a bunch of written work as well from a whole bunch of different people. So please go check that out. And at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media as well. Follow that, please do. Again, this was my bad. I keep saying this because I hate to do it, but and so this will be the last time, I promise, that we schedule a Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern time, because for at least some parts of the world, it's important that we not compete with the live broadcast of my brother Netfa Freeman and Voices with Vision at the mighty WPFW in Washington, D.C. So if you feel conflicted and hop back over to that, I have no problems with that, and come on back when you're finished. And I want to say vice versa, although I don't know that would work since his audience can't be hearing this at the same time. So, and then one other thing, please. We did a lot yesterday with Bashi Rose on the Black Arts Movement, with the brothers Kamal Franklin and Kalanji Changa from Renegade Culture yesterday afternoon, and then wrapped it up with DC hip hop extravaganza with Head Rock and Tim Hicks of the Cornell West Theory. So please check all that out and share all of that as well. A lot of fascinating things were covered in those discussions. Yeah, so please check that out. And one bit of news, by the way, shout out to, I only know of this person as Mother, who won our trivia giveaway during the Renegade Culture broadcast, and has decided to turn that prize over to someone else. So we're going to have to do another trivia. So we have a trivia, a Renegade Culture prize package available for those who are interested and want to get involved in potentially winning that as well. So we'll stay tuned for more on that. And shout out to, I'll say, her for now for being that magnanimous, and we appreciate that. And congratulations, because she did knock out all the three components of the trivia. So that said, so for a number of years, it's got for me, and I'll ask him if he remembers, but to me, it's at least 10 years. It's got to be, because when I was more actively involved, both as a member of organizations or as a grassroots journalist, in covering a lot of the movements and protests and activist events in the DC area, I would see this guy almost at every single one. And he'd be out there covering for many hours, long hours. And then over the years, I've come to, following him online, have seen that he covers a lot of protests. He's in the streets a lot with activists, keeping people like me who want to be informed but who are no longer participating in that way, sometimes feeling like we're still there. And then over the years, I honestly didn't realize this at first. I flip around. It turns out, just through, paying attention to journalism and sports in general, turns out this cat is doing a lot of interesting sports reporting, covering mainstream sports, but again, with a very different lens to it, for outlets like Deadspin and New York Daily News. So, and for those who, many will be aware already that I'm talking about Chuck Modiano. So I want to bring him up now and welcome him to the program. Chuck, good morning, welcome, and thanks for joining me.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Ball. Great to be here.
And please, is Jared, and same thing. Peace to you, Johnny. Same thing in these spaces. We don't need all that formality.
Fair enough. But I just want to say it's not out of elitism, but you worked hard for that PhD. I just want to let you know.
I did work hard, but more importantly, I was going to say I appreciate people remembering or acknowledging it because I'm still paying for it. So it's
right.
Might as well get acknowledged. And yes, absolutely. Shout out to Net for Freeman and Voices with Vision. And like I said, Chuck was gracious enough with his time. So next time we can't do Tuesday morning. So that's all on me. But anyway, Chuck, again, thanks for coming on the program. I wanted to, invite you on because again, I follow you on Twitter at ChuckModi1. And see all the time you are in the streets. I mean, for years you've been doing this. So my initial question to you was, given the broader journalism environment in which you work, could you describe your brand of journalism and how it is you actually get to practice it? I'm actually amazed that you get to actually do what you're doing.
I mean, sure. Now, because you've been talking about the concept of emancipatory journalism for about a decade now. So let me just say that, and you could talk about that. Dr. Shaw, who talks about that. Sometimes it's called emancipatory journalism. Sometimes it's called movement journalism. Tina Vasquez recently wrote a great article on movement journalism. Sometimes I use the word justice journalism. And what it really is taking the point of view of the oppressed versus people in authority, that we believe people who are the recipients of oppression are the best experts to talk about and understand oppression. Those who receive racism have a greater in-depth knowledge of racism. Those who receive sexism have a greater in-depth knowledge of that. And those who are the recipients of police brutality are also in the best position to talk about that police terror.
But I mean, even just professionally, I mean, for those of us who are obviously it's easy to be critical of the commercial media and journalism environment. And even those of us who've gone through journalism schools, we often see that kind of work isn't funded, paid for, isn't welcomed by other journalists, right. Certainly editors and publishers. So is there anything you could share about how you maneuver in that world? Even if you were talking to someone who was thinking about becoming a journalist who might want to still do this kind of work, how do you, is it a balance with the other work you do that's, like I said, focused on on sports, or is it, I don't know, is it, I don't know.
I haven't figured that part out yet. For the most part, most of the journalism that I do, whether it was going to Ferguson or Standing Rock or Charlottesville or DC, is really on my own. It's not a very sustainable model, to be quite honest with you, to the aspiring journalist students. And we have to fix that. We absolutely have to fix that. I haven't figured that part out of how we fix that, but I do know that there are so many people in the streets who are doing what I do. But, many are anonymous, who they pull out a camera and they want to keep police accountable. I mean, when we talk about journalism in the cell phone age, we're really talking about exposing oppression in a way that we could not have done before, pre-cell phones. You had gatekeepers, right? In the civil rights movement, you did have a couple of photographers in the New York Times who were taking pictures of the dogs and the fire hoses. But even then, there were gatekeepers. And right now, really anyone can do citizen media. So when you're talking about a woman like Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old Black woman who changed the entire world by showing George Floyd for 9 minutes, and I think about how terrified she must have been during those 9 minutes with those police officers right there. That goes to show you that any citizen can do this work. And in that sense, very few people are ever going to change the world more than Darnella Frazier. At the same time, if you're asking me, is it a viable profession? I don't know if I could tell you that.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, and that's sort of, and I don't mean to in any way negatively draw the distinction, but just as I'm listening to you describe that there is a distinction between even what Darnella Frazier did and its impact notwithstanding, and the kind of work you're doing in that the pursuit of struggle, the ability. And perhaps it's a privilege, the ability that you have to do this. I don't know, but the ability to, or the desire to go from struggle spot to struggle spot to struggle spot, and at times in the most heated moments of those struggles, to cover these things is. Anyway, as opposed to being on hand and doing the righteous and difficult work, because like even as a grown man with some size, I have been in spots where you start to film the police, and even when they just turn their cameras back on you, that's intimidating. Yeah. So to stand there as a woman, as a Black woman in the street, or anybody in the street, and they, and you stand there and watch them do. I mean, that's anyway. Go ahead. I just wanted to.
It's certainly an important point. I have a separate job. Even outside the mainstream sports journalism. And in that way, my separate job offers me a privilege to do a lot of this work. So it doesn't necessarily answer the question as far as we have a problem in protest journalism and those who cover protests who keep coming out. Very few last more than 2 years. That's just a fact. So we have that issue. And we have to work on some sort of a sustainable model so that we can have more journalists come out and do this work, because I believe it's critically important. When you go back to Charlottesville, part of the reason, and thousands came out against the Nazis in Charlottesville, part of the reason we were able to dox many people, part of the reason many were sent to jail for the brutality, was because there were so many cameras around that people took photos of the neo-Nazis and paired them up, and found out many were school teachers, and found out many were like nurses and doctors, and were able to get them to lose their jobs. And a lot has happened since that time, but that's just a one case example of why we need these cameras in these environments, whether it is the police or whether it's the white supremacist movement that is emerging and re-emerging right now.
As you've been to all these spots, are there similarities or threads other than, I guess, obviously, I don't know. Well, let me not even, are there similarities or threads that you've noticed from place to place in terms of the formations of protesters or the formations of those against whom they're protesting, or the behavior of the police, maybe?
Yes.
What could you share about that?
The behavior of the police is consistent. So, I really started filming during Trayvon and just going up to people and asking, why did you come out here today? Because there's a story between the distance of someone's couch and the street. And we want to find out that story. Now, when you get to Ferguson, you see the police oppression against the protesters. It was incredible. You saw the tear gas, the rubber bullets. You saw the flashbangs. You heard it. You felt it. And then you saw that play out in almost every predominantly Black protest that has happened. And you saw that play out, and as well as Standing Rocks, much of the brutality was the same. But what's different in this time, when we have the Proud Boys and white supremacists in DC, and what was different in Charlottesville, is that when neo-Nazis push up against police, they are not met with the same force, aggression, arrests, or repercussions that Black protesters are. Even though they are armed, even though they have pepper spray on them, even though they are going around stabbing people, even though they are rioting in the DC streets, ripping off signs and banners in Black churches and other private residences, which we're told this property damage is so terrible, when neo-Nazis do it, they do not get the repercussion of an unarmed, peaceful Black protester.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, yeah, clearly. Thank you very much.
But you know that already.
Yeah, I mean, well, part of yeah, I do. But part of the other thing I was also curious about that I don't and haven't gotten to see, at least for a long time, is the ways in which the protesters are organized. And I know being a journalist is being a white male journalist at that is not the same as being a member of a Black organized protest or organized movement. So I wouldn't expect you to but in terms of what you've observed, and I guess part of what I'm getting at is the few times in recent years that I have been involved journalistically or present in some of these spaces. I don't know. I'm more. I find myself becoming critical of the people in protest, not as much or more than anybody else, but the kinds of formations that are out there, the people, the I don't know what I'm trying to say. Maybe the hustle that's involved, the playing around, the disorganized, the lack of seriousness, the event seekers, as opposed to people trying to actually be sustained, members of organized movement. I don't know. So that was, something that I if you had any thoughts about, or if you've noticed anything, or I don't know.
Well,
that was just something that
it's
was
an
on my
important
mind.
thought. As a media person, I try to stay away from a lot of the organizing. Let me know when to show up. When is the protest happening? Anytime there's organizing, there's a lot of tension because the fight. I mean, you're fighting police terror. That's a big fight. People are getting arrested and getting false charges often that we've seen. Food supporters are getting their food taken away and looted by police. These things are happening. So it's going to cause tension. Sometimes it's going to cause argument. Sometimes it's going to cause disagreement between different organizations. From a media perspective, I'm going to show up and show the oppression. I sort of try to stay away from protest politics that go on, because at the end of the day, I'm not concerned what organization you're in when you're being beaten by police or you're getting a false charge by police. So in DC alone, people like to say things like, Black Lives Matter as all encompassing, really any Black protester, right? Or Antifa for any white protester. And this is the language. But in truth, in DC, if I go to any given protest, I could point out members of 10 different organizations, Black Lives Matter DC being one, and they do great work, as do many other organizations, and many unaffiliated. And obviously, journalistically, it's not easy to just put that all together. People like to wrap it up in an umbrella, but there's a lot of complexities to it.
What are they, I know you were just in DC covering these most recent protests. Is there anything happening right now that that folks are not paying enough attention to, or that you're looking at? What do you think we need to know more about?
What everyone needs to know about is in January, Proud Boys, Nazis, and other white supremacists, along with Trumpers, are coming into town on 3 different dates. I believe the 6th, 17th, 20th, they're going to be in town. And what has changed in DC is that this past weekend and then a weekend in November, people got hurt. People got hurt because there was not a resistance that came out as like 2018. 2018 in DC, the anniversary of the Charlottesville, quote unquote, Unite the Riot, where neo-Nazis came. Thousands of people, and I'm talking about thousands of white people too, came out to say, no, this is not acceptable here. You cannot roam these streets, Nazis. And really sent them home, came out by the thousands. And we know in November, thousands came out to celebrate Trump's loss. But yet 1 week later, when Nazis came to town and were tearing up the city and were rioting and were assaulting people, that crowd stayed home. So I don't know what it takes, but I think we have to return to the thousands who came out in 2018 and the thousands who came out for Biden, for his victory, but aren't coming out to fight this re-emerging white supremacy. And as a white person, I'm talking to white people. That's just me. I'm talking to white people. I honestly do not believe that fighting Nazis should be the job of Black people, on top of fighting racism, on top of fighting police, and on top of doing all that. Of course, many do. Of course that happens, but as a white person, I just feel that's the ground floor of anti-racism for white people.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. The one problem is that a lot of people, you know, they're between COVID and their excitement over just getting Biden elected is going to, you know, keep people home more than in 2018 for sure. Yeah, so that. Yeah. Anyway, so that's interesting. 3 dates in January. They're coming around, huh? Okay.
But let me say, Doc, COVID didn't stop people from celebrating Trump's loss.
No, I
didn't
know.
stop a lot of white
I'm
people
hearing
from
you.
doing that.
No, I'm hearing you.
I want to just throw that one out there.
No, I appreciate it. I get it. I get
in
it.
the street weren't worried about COVID.
That's right. That's right. No, the contradiction is clear on that one for sure. Yeah.
But your second point, I do want to address your second point, which is very important. Was the incredible outpouring of white anti-racism that we saw both in Charlottesville, because thousands came from DC, and the following year, was it a function of anti-Trumpism? And can that be duplicated in a Biden administration? That's the question before us, and I don't know the answer. And the last 2 times the Proud Boys and other Nazis came in town, it hasn't been encouraging.
Yeah, no, well, we'll see, but I think a lot of people were just excited to be participating in an anti-Trump event, and getting out of the house, you know, in a pandemic, but risking and even protesting is one thing, but 2018, you were all right about that in terms of the numbers that came out, but the idea, anyway, I'm skeptical that the idea of coming out and dealing with a potentially uproarious and violent crowd, you know, it's one thing to have a peaceful march, like out here where I live in the suburbs, and they walk around the mall and they say Black Lives Matter and everybody goes home. It's another one when you're actually coming up against, you know, young, angry white boys, some of whom I know are intoxicated on either liquor or just whiteness and ready to get in it. And I think that's different, you know, in terms of expecting people to come out, or, you know, what we would expect even as they contradict themselves in a crisis. I did want to I mean, we can come back to some of this, and I'm inviting people to raise comments and questions, and there are some that I'll get to shortly. But I did want to, because the other part of your work that I also find fascinating is your approach to sports coverage, which I know is the other part of, or the main part of your professional side, you know. But you also kind of do that unconventionally and challenge a lot of the way that's covered in terms of particularly how race plays a role in all of that. So the same thing, I'll start with that with my last question with this area. Is there anything in the sports world, because I know you've covered the Kaepernick issue very closely and all that, but is there anything going on in the sports world in particular right now that you're looking at that you would want others to pay attention to? Similar as you were warning about the Proud Boys, is there a Proud Boys warning in sports, or something equivalent that you're looking at?
I start by always reminding people that the NFL are still colluding against Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed as well. They're still colluding. So we tend to think of it as old news, but a crime is still being committed against them. Collusion is a crime by the owners. So for media, when you write a free agent list, Colin Kaepernick needs to be at the top of that list, or you are complicit in that owner crime. So a lot of media have moved on, if they were ever on board to begin with, for fighting against owner collusion against Colin Kaepernick. But I think we have to keep banging that drum. We have to keep that fight up.
But is it collusion after this deal that he signed that no one has seen or we're not supposed to know about? I mean, it wasn't. I thought that was supposed to have been part of the agreement that he signed, that more or less it's okay for them to not.
No, collusion is still happening, and Eric Reed has been thrown out. We don't know the details of that. I suspect part of what he did sign was to try to get back in the league, and hoping would he get back in the league. But collusion is still happening. I don't believe that has gone away. In fact, the sham workout that Roger Goodell organized, last December, part of that workout was a ploy to get Kaepernick to sign a waiver, which would remove future collusion claims. So it is still happening. So I'm going to always start with Kaepernick. It's easy to move on to the next subject, and Eric Reed. And we have to talk about Eric Reed for a second, because he has been the most vocal player on the collective bargaining agreement, on disability rights, on disabilities being cut for past players who could barely think because of concussions or barely walk, and they're often their spouses are afraid to leave the home because they might turn on the stove and light their home on fire. And I've spoken to many spouses who talk about that. So Eric Reed spoke out about that, and he's getting punished too. So we can't forget.
So he's not in the league at all right now. He doesn't have a team.
Eric Reed is not in the league. And let me tell you this. He was the second tackler of all the safeties last year in the NFL. Second in the league for all the safeties, I believe, after Budda Baker. I'm sure nobody on the Texans or the Cowboys could use a tackler right now from the safety position.
Well, look, I honestly, I feel like I've been driven out of the league as a fan, but by all the politics, especially around my former team in DC. But I just checked in this past week, and good Lord, could they use a safety and a quarterback? So you're talking about, pick up those two right there, and this squad here, led by a wildly racist man, could make the playoffs and do maybe even more, given how bad the division is right now. Anyway, so I mean, to me, the collusion part was easy just from watching what was happening with my former team. How we haven't had I'm still saying, how long has it been since that team had a decent quarterback? And since Sean Taylor, I don't know that the team has had a decent safety either. So, but anyway,
you're going back to Joe Gibbs era.
That's what I'm saying. The second, even the second one. So I mean, that's how. By the way, how close do you follow DC sports in terms of John Thompson passed? Do you follow his career and even some of the locally based controversies around him? I've been trying to catch up with a couple people, over the not to disrespect him, but who have raised a lot of questions about I don't know. Anyway, just his career and relationship in terms of race and history with the Hoyas and all kinds of stuff. Anyway,
it's funny you say that, because I grew up a Georgetown Hoyas fan, which is very important to my development as a sports fan and racial development. But from New York.
I was going to say, how did that work?
What it worked was you had a sea of St. John's fans around you who didn't take kindly. So I heard a lot of racist stuff growing up as well. But, this was a time where it was Ewing, and you had Chris Mullen and Mark Jackson and some incredible St. John's team. Syracuse
and Willie Glass too, right? That's him too, right?
Walter Berry was the guy.
That's right.
Walter Berry.
That's right.
He didn't pan out in the pros, but Walter Berry at the time was as good as Mullen and Mark Jackson. You had Bill Wennington. You had five future NBA people on that team. So I went to school every single day arguing. This was my years. I was arguing. I was arguing with a lot of other white people who were St. John's fans. And that was John Thompson I love. But I could tell you at the time, growing up as a kid, that white people thought John Thompson was racist for having an all-black team.
Oh, I remember that.
Georgetown. Yeah. Absolutely.
I remember that. That he was accused of that very clearly. Anyway, but there's always been these grumblings about how he sort of played. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll have to come back to that another time when I have it and when I have someone who can really talk about it. But for sure, when I was growing up, the Hoyas were everything. And the projection of an all-black team at Georgetown, which was a campus that that I think many of us who either grew up in or around DC never even saw. Georgetown is not easily found just walking around DC. You're not just going to stumble on Georgetown's campus. It's very well hidden for a city so small, relatively speaking. I mean, it's wild, actually. But anyway, they were a projection of Black pride for sure, and all of that. And I'm still heartbroken over the Villanova loss and all of that. Ooh. I mean, I still have. I mean, all of those. I mean, all of that. But anyway, I was curious about that. Somebody here has a question for you. Did you read the recent New York Times piece by Naomi Osaka, where she starts off praising LeBron and encouraging athletes to act? My thoughts were king of call Obama. I'm not sure. Riverman, can you elaborate on that? But go ahead. Did you see that story?
I didn't read the piece. The last couple of weeks I've been sort of out of the sports loop because I've been in the streets so heavily. A little more out of the sports loop than normal. But I mean, what Naomi Osaka has done the last couple of months has been incredible. To use her platform to talk about police terror over and over and over. I just think I can't say enough about her.
Okay. Well, listen, man, I don't want to take up all your time. I did want to just wrap with you a little bit about your work, because I think it's really important. And I want to encourage people to follow you on Twitter and elsewhere. That is actually how I end up seeing most of your protest coverage. Yeah. Do you house it somewhere in particular? Is there a website you put this at, or does it just get folded into other reporting, or I don't know, what do you do with all of that?
So, I get that question a lot, and I'm going to solve that problem in 2020. Right now it's at Chuck Mo D1 on Twitter. Mm-hmm. But what I'm going to do is start putting this all together in 2020. I keep getting that. So I have not been as organized because a lot of people want to go back and find out what happened on this day. And there's a lot of footage, and it makes it difficult to find. And I want to make sure it's easier to find, particularly in the case of people catching charges and then also indicting, in DC's case, MPD.
Yeah, certainly. I think many of us would appreciate that, because also it would be a good repository and warehouse for all that footage that you're getting. But just real quick, Osaka praised LeBron for wearing T-shirts, but I thought she needs to get with David West. I think LeBron has done enough. Okay, so David West isn't stepping up, I guess, is the point. Okay, well, I think to Chuck's point, my point would be to the model that Chuck is representing here. The more organized we are, the more noise that is made in the streets, the more we can expect from athletes. I don't think it's the other way around. So
yes, what you said.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, Chuck, man, thanks again for joining us this morning and taking the time. We'll keep following your work. I appreciate you and keep it up, man. Thank you very much.
Doc, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Take care, man. Oh, my bad. Okay, everybody, listen, please do follow Chuck's work. And I appreciate you coming through this morning for a relatively shorter hit of I Mix What I Like Live. We appreciate Chuck taking the time and joining us, and please do check back with us. Much more coming up. IMixWhatILike.org for all the older stuff, where all the newer stuff is coming. A lot is on the way. Anyway, check it all out, and at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. Again, thanks everybody. And as always, like Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind. I mix what I like.